Well, the vessel appears to have struck something underwater, probably over quite some length of its hull. And as a result of that, it's taken in a large amount of water into what would be the lower wing tanks on one side of the vessel, which has caused it to list to substantial angles. And from that point onwards, it's slowly started to capsize as more water has crept on board through the upper decks.
And as a naval architect, could you just talk us through, because people might think there would be some form of barrier that could be put in place to stop the water from progressing once that has happened?
Well, the design of these wing tanks on the side of the ship is there to protect against collision damage. Now, the trouble is this is not a conventional collision, and what appears to have happened is, rather like the Costa Concordia, there's been a rip along the side of the vessel, probably around the midships. And the effect of that has been to get a very large amount of water into these wing tanks, which has given this uncontrollable list, which should have corrected itself. Ideally, these tanks are cross-connected to the other side, so the water should level out. But if the heel goes beyond a certain point, then that doesn't happen. And that seems to be the case in this point. So it's sat on its side about 45 degrees to 60 degrees for quite some time, and very slowly started to flood above the main vehicle spaces.
We now know, of course, that only a relatively small number of people were able to escape, and an awful lot remain unaccounted for at this time. Once the ship has started to turn, as it did, and you said it was a relatively slow process, what should the crew have been doing? What instructions should they have been getting in order to try and get out?
Well, you would have expected that they would, for instance, have launched all their life rafts, which they didn't do. The life rafts are all clearly strapped to one of the upper decks and weren't launched at all. Only two of them, I believe, were even attempted at launching. You should be getting the passengers away from the internal spaces of the ship, because they're very large open spaces which you can't move around in once the vessel's at any significant angle of heel. So you would want to try and get the passengers lined up on the side decks higher up on the high side, so that they could at least sort of slide down the side, or at least get off if the vessel rolls over. And it was clear that this vessel was going to roll over sooner or later.
And Ian, just to give us a sense of what might have caused that scale of damage, I mean, it looks as if this is a very, very considerable impact.
Well, the vessel apparently would be travelling at somewhere around 20-21 knots, I believe, which is quite fast. And if you hit something underwater at that speed, you're likely to tear a great long hole in the side of the ship, which is exactly what happened with Costa Concordia. So you get long tears, and this is unfortunately almost impossible to recover from. Ships are not designed to have these long tears along their side. So as a result of that, she's flooded rather more quickly than would normally be assumed.